My feelings around dieting are complicated. I've dabbled in diet programs, never that seriously, but I do have particular foods that I try to eat and ones that I try to avoid. I'm someone who cares a lot about my health, and I've gotten more into fitness over the past couple years. So when I started seeing anti-diet content on my feeds around this new year, I was intrigued. I've actually seen much more anti-diet content on my feeds lately than pro-diet content. People have been warning me about imminent body shaming and weight loss promotion around the New Year's, but I didn't wind up seeing that much of that. But it's been quite refreshing to see the dominance of messages that are anti-diet and anti-diet culture, which I see as two different things. I'll get to that in a bit. One piece I saw was from NPR's Life Kit podcast about how to divest from diet culture, and that one really got me thinking. It's an interesting episode. I'll link to it in the description. So this video is kind of a response to that. Hey, it's your girl Ahsante, helping you move consciously and creatively through life. So let's talk about diet culture for a minute. Diet culture is the universal valuing of weight loss for the sake of weight loss. It's the valuing of thinner bodies over larger bodies. It's the, oh wow, you look good, did you lose weight? As if bigger people would of course be trying to lose weight and that weight loss would be the thing that makes someone look good. It's the idea that restrictive food plans are justified as a means to weight loss. It's the assumption that anyone could be thin if they just tried hard enough. It equates thinness to health and health to moral rightness. There are lots of reasons why this attitude is a problem. Having a high weight doesn't mean that you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol or any of those things that are actual health indicators. Just like being thin doesn't mean you're getting the proper nutrients or maintaining your muscle strength. Not to mention that the science around nutrition is always developing and changing, and we don't have a complete picture of how every aspect of the body works and how everything interconnects. You can't tell someone's health just by looking at them, and unless you're providing someone with medical care or you've been invited by them to share your opinion, it's really not your place to comment on someone else's health or body size. Bodies are by nature incredibly personal. Most of us have some part of our bodies that we feel sensitive about at one point or another. So unless someone's health does immediately affect you, maybe because you live with them or you would become a caretaker if they did get sick, unless that's the case, then someone else's weight or whether they're deciding to lose weight is none of your business. And generally, I just don't comment on other people's bodies. You look great is about as much as I'll say, and I feel much better saying that their outfit is nice or that they seem happy today. Like, I wish I'd been told that I look happy as much as I've been told that I look tired. Like, yes, I'm exhausted. Thanks for bringing it up. And there are multiple factors that go into being a certain weight besides your own personal willpower. What foods you have access to in your environment, your genetics, economic stresses, your ability to control your own time and prepare your own meals, which are class issues. Diet culture focuses all of the attention on a person's individual choices and presents weight as a personal moral failure. And then there's that health is not always everyone's priority at all times. I know it hasn't always been for me, and that's fine. When I was in college, I was eating burgers and shakes every week, if not multiple times a week, insomnia cookies all the time, plus whatever they fed us in the dining hall, and I did not feel any type of shame about it. Partially because I was surrounded by so many people doing the same thing, like who cares? Actually, do you want to go grab some Nokes? And partially because if this caramel shake is the only thing that's bringing joy to my life right now, then I will take that creamy, sweet, whipped cream topped joy. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to graduate and get the heck out of here. I will deal with my feelings later. And I did. Made a whole video about it. The insistence on health for everyone at all times is an element of perfectionism in our culture, and using the same standard of health for everyone is homogenizing. BMI, or body mass index, was created by a Belgian statistician, not physician, named Adolf Quetelet in the 19th century based exclusively on a small sampling of white male Scottish soldiers. It was meant to represent the ideal man, eugenics alert, and it was not meant to be a universal measure of health, which is basically what it's become. But homogenizing benefits capitalism. It's easier and cheaper to sell one standard product than to tailor solutions to fit every individual's needs and circumstances. Industries have convinced people that health looks a certain way so they can sell everyone the same fix: weight loss. So it's not hard for me to be anti-diet culture. I'm definitely against policing other people's body size and appearance, the universal pressure to lose weight, and shaming people for eating certain foods. And I do want to call out here that the main culprit is body shame. Body shame hasn't gotten as much airtime as body positivity, but I think calling out the converse helps you to recognize the specific harm that the body positivity movement is working against. And when I think about my own relationship with my body and the images of bodies that I see, I find it's harder to be positive if I'm creating an emotion that isn't there, and it's easier to recognize the emotion of shame when it is there and say, hey, That doesn't belong there. Let's root that out. So while I am anti-body shame and anti-diet culture, I'm questioning whether I can really be anti-diet. Don't get me wrong, I think dieting is overrepresented and way overdone. I also think that trademarked, mass-produced, ultra-processed, brand name food products are overrepresented and overdone. And I can kind of see how one is there to counter the other. I think especially given our current food landscape, it's fair for people to be concerned about their health and nutrition. One idea put forward in the Life Kit episode is that healthism is a cousin to diet culture, and that a focus on wellness or fitness or getting strong can just be diet culture by another name. Which, yeah, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. There was one quote in the episode where a guest said, "You are not afraid of being fat, you are afraid of being treated like a fat person." And I'm like, nope, I'm afraid of disease. I'm afraid of diseases that are brought on and aggravated by obesity. And you don't know me, you don't know my health profile, but I am very justified in being worried about obesity-related diseases. I do see that because diet culture is falling out of favor and body positivity and holistic wellness are on the rise, that you do have companies co-opting the language of wellness while still ultimately glorifying weight loss and restrictive dieting. The rebranding of Weight Watchers to WW, which they say stands for Wellness That Works, is one clear example of this. You're not fooling anyone, Weight Watchers. If you think you're slick, Weight Watchers, you're not. Even though they have added elements around sleep and activity, it's still about weight loss. That's what's seen as victory, that's what's glorified and touted on the website, and you're doing a proprietary version of calorie counting to get there. So I do see the equating of wellness to losing weight as an extension of diet culture, which is problematic. And I do see that many diets are unrealistic and harmful, especially if they lead to disordered eating and skipping meals. But outside of toxic extreme dieting, I think diets in general are tools to manage your body in an intentional way. And I do believe in intentional living. I remember when I went on Weight Watchers when I was in high school, maybe 15 or so, because the family is going on Weight Watchers. We are on Weight Watchers now. That's what we're doing. Okay. Weight Watchers categorizes food as being a certain amount of points based on its nutritional content, things like calories, protein, and fiber. And it allows you to eat a certain amount of points each day. I think back then it was based on your gender and weight. Their formulas for points change periodically. And at the time, I was allowed to have 24 points in a day. And I remember the moment when I discovered that these delicious muffins that we had been getting from the grocery store, I'd been eating them regularly for breakfast. I mean, delicious lemon poppy seed, orange cranberry, chocolate chip, just delightful breakfast material, about the size of my hand with the muffin puff up top. The muffins were 15 points. I was utterly devastated. There were no muffins in the house after that. Rest in peace to my morning muffin. But while I was highly disappointed that I could no longer partake in my morning muffin without sacrificing most of my food allotment for the day, it was the first time that I realized that I hadn't really been paying attention much to the nutritional value of what I was eating. Just the process of whipping out my point slider and looking through the label did make me think more intentionally about what was in the food I was consuming, how much carbs, protein, and fiber the food contained, rather than just thinking about my taste buds. And it made me consider the consequences and effects of eating certain foods in a way that I hadn't been doing at all. If we define a diet as a weight loss program involving some unsustainable restrictive eating regimen, then there's evidence and wide acknowledgement that those don't work for most people. I've had the Slim Fast shakes, like many of us millennials, and no, I would not recommend. I'm very much not into calorie counting, and the novelty of calculating Weight Watchers points wore off pretty quickly. But if we define a diet as any rules about food or any attempt to manage your weight through food, then I don't think I can be completely against having a diet. On the anti-diet side, you have people acting basically like vegetables are the enemy. I saw one anti-diet TikToker making jokes about different diet foods, including how cauliflower rice is a sorry excuse for a grain and no one should really be eating this. And it was funny for sure. And I get it, you're pushing against pop culture, you're making jokes, and I guess you're punching up because it's cauliflower. But at the end of the day, it still seems a lot like shaming people for their food choices. You're still putting a moral value on food. I guess you just flipped who the food antagonist is. But people who have allergies have rules around food. People with celiac disease and other medical conditions have rules around food. Some people want to eat low-inflammatory diets or gluten-free diets or are lactose intolerant. People have different ways of managing their food intake so that their bodies don't have negative reactions and so they can feel their best. Do we only honor that if it's medically diagnosed? I do think the questions of why you're aiming to diet and what kind of diet you're adopting and why you're trying to lose weight if weight loss is your goal, I do think those questions are relevant and that you can't paint everyone with the same brush. Just like you can't look at someone who's fat and say that they're definitely unhealthy because of their weight, you can't look at someone who's trying to lose weight and say that it's definitely an unhealthy decision based on diet culture. There's a line, which is the case within a lot of personal development practices, between trying to fix something you think is wrong, disliking yourself because of outside pressure, and accepting yourself where you are, appreciating where you are in this moment while trying to improve in the future. And if weight loss is your personal development goal, the question is, why do you think being at a smaller weight would be an improvement? Am I doing this out of self-criticism or out of self-care? I just read the book The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor, who is a radical self-love and social justice activist. And she makes the point in her book that we should question why we want to make certain changes to our body. Is it out of self-love for our own authentic ways of being, or is it because we're being pressured by what she calls the body shame profit complex? Media and marketing that sells us not only diet products, but also body-constricting garments, anti-aging skin creams, and other products that suggest our bodies are not okay existing the way they naturally are. Quoting from the book, "This does not mean we should be full stop averse to changing our bodies or that making makeup, fashion, or aesthetic choices is antithetical to radical self-love. What each of us needs to live in the fullness of our own personal expression will be as varied as our individual bodies and dependent on our lived experiences. For some of us, moving away from body hyper-consciousness is key to that journey. For others whose identities and bodies are more profoundly policed and erased by society, the desire to have those identities seen and affirmed is an essential aspect of the radical self-love journey. Of course, we can wear makeup, join a gym, and color our hair. I am a loud proponent of being unapologetically adorned, but the practice of inquiry shows us where we've adopted the media indoctrination that connects our worth and value to our appearance and external selves." I thought the book was super interesting, and I'll be doing a full review over on my Patreon if you want to hear more of my thoughts about it. In terms of dieting, this means asking yourself, am I trying to eat a certain way or exercise or lose weight because of external pressures or subconscious feelings of unworthiness or associations of thinness with beauty and health? Or is this decision really what feels right and comfortable for me? I think there are completely valid, non-fat phobic reasons to want to be at a smaller weight, namely to avoid disease or try to reverse disease, as well as trying to reduce pain. I've worked on fitness and weight loss in the past because I didn't want it to be painful to walk up several flights of stairs. I was moving around apartments a ton after college, and I was tired of being so sore from moving my own belongings. And I was generally feeling very sluggish and wanted to have more energy. And although I've not been very, very overweight myself, I have seen up close and personal how, after a certain weight, your knees can start hurting from carrying around all that weight. It can become harder to walk, and once you lose your mobility, that can bring on a whole slew of health issues. And I've seen how if you go with the mentality that many anti-diet folks preach of eat whatever you want whenever you want, it's not that difficult to get your body to that extreme point of basically being in chronic pain, especially because fast food companies are specifically designing their food products to make you want more. And the drive-thru is open 24 hours. So I think it's fair for people to want to avoid disease and chronic pain, like that's kind of the point of medicine. And if you think of your food as part of your medicine and nourishment, especially as preventative care, then I think that's a good reason to have some sort of diet, some sort of rules around food or things that you do and don't want to eat. I can acknowledge that there isn't enough discussion around the multiple environmental factors that bring on disease outside of personal decisions and weight, while also acknowledging that weight is one big factor that can bring about an aggravate disease. And I think that where anti-diet rhetoric loses people that would otherwise be in agreement is when it doesn't acknowledge that nutrition part of health as being important at all when it comes to one's own personal decision-making about food. While only eat baby carrots, tuna fish, and grapes doesn't sound right for me, eat whatever you want whenever you want doesn't sound right for me either. This is where intuitive eating comes in as an increasingly talked about alternative to dieting. It's often summarized as eat whatever you want whenever you want, or just follow your natural instincts around food, but that's not really what it is. It's based on a set of 10 principles that are around listening to your body, recognizing your hunger cues, and only eating in alignment with those hunger cues. This includes eating only when you're hungry and right as you start getting hungry rather than waiting until you're completely ravenous and therefore in a position to make less reasoned eating decisions like overeating or going for a treat food rather than a more satisfying one. It includes eating mindfully without distractions, noticing how food tastes, how it makes you feel, and it includes noticing when you feel full and stopping there. That's definitely different from eat whatever you want whenever you want, because sometimes you feel like continuing to eat, and sometimes you want to eat your feelings, but one of those 10 intuitive eating principles is that you have to learn to deal with your emotions in other ways. Intuitive eating also relies on food habituation. There's a period when you're starting intuitive eating where you allow yourself to give in to your temptation foods whenever you want to during meals. And the thesis is that once you're able to have access to these foods all the time, and you know you'll have access to them all the time, they'll become less tempting because they're not forbidden. They're just normal foods. And then after that time period, which is different for everyone, you won't have cravings as intense and you won't want to binge. And that will lead you to trust yourself more around food and become more at peace with food. But you do have to have that initial temptation indulgence period first, which could last a few days or a few weeks or some undetermined period of time before you're habituated. And the 10th principle is to honor your health with gentle nutrition. So you are still keeping in mind what your body needs to do its best and factoring that into your food decisions. In communicating what intuitive eating is, people tend to take all of the nuance out of the methodology and distill it down to eat what you want or there are no bad foods, because of the key principles that say not to deny yourself any food in particular and that you're not good or bad for eating in a certain way. But it seems to me that the nuance of the system is what makes it work. It seems like you have to do the whole package collectively and embrace the full set of concepts, not just take one, because then you wouldn't be in balance. And although it's not as strict as a diet that says yes to these foods, no to these foods, these are your limits on daily food intake, it is still having some sort of rules around food. Even if those rules are called principles and they're meant to be more flexible and forgiving, you still have some sort of guidelines. I'll link to the 10 principles in the description so you can check them out for yourself. In looking more into intuitive eating, I realized this was something I was kind of doing when I decided to go vegan a few years back, and I was vegan for about 2 years. It was a different means to the same end of being a more mindful eater and releasing my emotions around food and becoming more at peace with food. I made a whole video about my journey with that too. Proponents of intuitive eating often discuss how diet culture messes with your natural inclination to eat according to your own tastes, but I found less discussion addressing how fast food companies manipulate those tastes altogether. And as someone who felt addicted to fast food, my problem was not that my intuition wasn't being listened to, it's that my intuition was being hijacked by fast food marketing. Fast food wasn't shameful, on the contrary, it was glorified, it was a treat, and it was also the most convenient and doable option sometimes. So as far as allowing myself to have access to the food whenever I wanted, I already did. That was kind of the problem. I was already habituated to fast food and I did not want it any less. And guess what? The food and its marketing are designed to make you feel that way. I always wanted more. Intuitive eating seems to be geared more towards chronic dieters and people who have been practicing more food restriction. But for myself, I just needed to cut it off and get out of the ever seductive pull that fast food seemed to have in my life. I needed some clear rules, and going vegan for a while and actively trying to eat healthy while being vegan, because I did just eat French fries at first. Doing that while being a mindful eater was incredibly helpful and did help me to heal my relationship with food. So yes, I do need a mechanism to control for the messages of diet culture. I also need a mechanism to control for the desires being created within me for foods that I would never naturally crave because they wouldn't exist outside of factories. If we're not going to publicly have guardrails around fast food and corporate food messaging, like for the good of society, then we at least need to be able to have guardrails around how we manage our own personal food intake. So I do have rules around food, and while I'm anti-diet culture, I'm not anti-diet if a diet feels right and useful for where you are in your life right now. But I am anti-corporate fast food and the ultra-processed food industrial complex, and the conditions that make fast food an appealing and sometimes necessary option for people. I'm anti-food deserts. I'm anti-grueling work schedules and long commutes that don't allow workers time to prepare food for themselves or cook full meals for their families. I'm anti-low wages that lead you to order off the dollar menu. I'm anti-marketing to children that meals of fried food equate to happiness. And I'm for increased access to produce and locally grown food, increased flexibility in worker schedules, living wages, individualized healthcare solutions, and people following the food rules or principles or guidelines that work for them, their environment, their body, and their personal goals. Over on Patreon, I'm going to be talking about The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. It explores her concepts of radical self-love and body empowerment, so you can join my Brilliant Beans community to catch that commentary. As always, remember to live spiritedly and think creatively, and I will see you next time.